So this is the ultimate content, if you like. Family law courts in Ireland. Do they work? Who benefits? And what can be changed? These are some of the comments that men have told me they got told in the Irish law courts over the last few years. So a work from home dad was told by a judge that judge is certainly not going to allow a situation where a man stays at home all day with young children doing nothing and puts his poor wife out to work. Could you imagine a woman who stays at home all day with a gang of children being accused of doing nothing? Another man was asked, when pleading for overnight access to his children, what is this obsession with men wanting to have overnight access to their children? As though there was something anathema about that, something absurd, like, sure. And if you extrapolate what the implications as to the thought process behind the judge were, you'd have to say his opinion was pretty much that that's not a man's job. This is the Irish Independent on the 26th of last month. And that's what the judges think of our family law system. So I suppose there is a perception that the courts favour women. We'd have to ask ourselves, why might that be? Women were unequal for centuries. It was grossly unfair. It was wrong. It is well on the way to being redressed and corrected. And two wrongs are certainly not going to make a right. Women were not allowed to own property. They weren't allowed to vote. And until 1972 in Ireland, it was written into legislation that a husband could beat his wife with a stick as long as it was no thicker than his thumb. That's 1972. Before that document.
Not really true.
That is true.
What legislation?
Yeah.
I haven't got the exact reference, but
From what I've heard, that myth has been totally debunked.
well, Owen Connolly is the one who has assured me that it is not a myth, and he has done the research, and I believe Owen.
Well, could you then, kind of get the reference and,
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
and share it with us, because
Yeah.
that's a pretty
But I was told it was an 1870s law in the UK, or in Ireland as it would have been called at the time. But what actually the rule of thumb, they used to say the rule of thumb came from this law. The rule of thumb was actually a measuring device from a way back in the tailoring trade. So that is a myth.
Okay, well, I'll stand corrected then. I heard it, as I say, elsewhere.
Wise to check sources for these things.
Well, thank you for that. I thought I had checked. We were taught in school, and you might like to correct me on this one too, if I'm wrong, that in Ireland, once you're married, you can have sex with your wife whenever you like. And that's what the priest told me. He's as good as a bishop, isn't he? I suppose at 14 years of age, with testosterone pumping around your body like mad, as all young lads did, it's a great ad for marriage, isn't it? But it's not entirely the right message to be giving kids. So women fought for equality, and the girls who grew up by the badly treated mothers grew up listening to these women who were being very, very unfairly and badly treated. Some of them are now judges in our family law courts. So is it understandable that despite all the training in the world and the greatest of intentions in the world, there could be some propensity for unconscious bias there? So society today is far better, not yet perfect at recognizing women's equality. I report that the family law courts are not fit for purpose, as our judge friend has just attested to, for 5 simple reasons. The system is adversarial instead of helpful, the judges are not appropriately trained, the environment is hostile, legal professionals are incorrectly rewarded, and family law courts have only titular authority. They have the power in theory and by name, but they can't actually use it. I further report that it could be made a lot better should we do, as I believe they do in Canada, and insist on mediation being entered into by the parties for a period of 24 months before legislation is permitted. So legislation becomes a last resort, not the first place you go when you're all emotional and your world is falling apart and you're terrified. Number 2, educating judges as to what children's needs actually are and educating them as to the fundamental basics of money and economics. 3, providing a purpose-built facility. 4, motivating speedy settlements. And 5, making court orders enforceable for all. This is just a little piece. Hopefully the sound will work on, that I thought might be interesting. It goes very much to what Brian was saying earlier on about parental alienation, but it also touches on
Michael, what is the solution to the problem?
Shared parenting. Shared parenting. What we need to do is have parents crafting the parenting plan under which their children will be raised in the event the parents aren't going to stay together.
Like a prenup?
Well, like a prenup, but actually a parenting plan in case you're going to get divorced at that particular moment. And if the parents can agree to a plan, a presumption in law that says that we're not going to favor either parent, that the child will be...
So you make this decision before you have the children or when they're born?
No, you make this decision at divorce. You go through a process to structure the plan under which the children will be raised.
There's a lot of acrimony.
If you can't agree, the state is not going to preference one parent over the other in the form of the divorce.
You asked Mark the other question, then I'll...
Mark, tell me, I understand that you have personal experience with divorce yourself.
Yes, I do. My parents split up whenever I was 10 years old, and it was a very high conflict divorce, and the conflict, the tension has remained. And one of the things that Alex says in this book, which I think is brilliant, is he says, let the divorce be the final answer. That is, once the marriage is over, stop fighting. Just let the battles end instead of having the battlefield shift to the children. And so, in my own experience, that's one of the things that I've always desired, just get along. Just get along. And I think that's one of the best things that most parents can do.
I said there are people who continue this kind of behavior because they want to have a relationship with that other person.
Yeah.
They want to resolve. Go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead.
I'll say, whenever you have children, your lives are intertwined with that other person for the rest of your life.
Right.
Because there's not only the children's birthday parties and Christmases and all that, but grandchildren come along. There's weddings to consider, all of that. And so there comes a time where it's just, let's get along.
And they're not married. There are feminists who are opposed to parental alienation syndrome, and they dismiss that, and they fill with all kinds of statistics about abuses and so forth, none of which we would dispute. But they can't dispute the fact that children, particularly girls who are raised in homes without a father, have statistically higher incidence of poor performance in school, drug and alcohol abuse, promiscuity.
What do you say to gay marriage then? I mean, you have 2 women raising children. There's no father in that house.
Gay divorce will be more frightening.
What we're saying there is that the courts aren't
Well, I mean, that's you're kidding, right? But that's prejudicial what you're saying, because 2 mommies can work the same as a mommy and a daddy.
But you're jumping tracks here in a very kind of weird way, which is that, gay marriage
Is that weird?
But what does that have to do with what we're saying? With gay marriage, I'm all in favor.
You said that girls need a father in the house, and I'm saying there are many girls who will be...
Where there is a father, but you're talking about completely disparate ideas. Where a father exists that is being denied,
I see.
That's the problem. Where there are 2 women, there are no fathers.
I see. It's a different, we're talking
I would say so. There's 2 women, there is no father.
Yeah. But it's an interesting point that people just fight for the rest of their lives, because they really are connected, they don't want to let go.
They need communication skills training to get to a workmanlike place about the relationship. They don't need to be emotionally involved on a go-forward basis. They need the skill set that will allow them to address problems.
But the surest way, and for many people, the surest way for you to lose an ongoing relationship with your child in adult life is these kids figure these things out.
I know.
They get older and they see.
Yes.
And one of the smartest things that was ever said to me was that all behavior is consistent, and that the way people behave in divorce is a view as to how they behave during the marriage. And children grow up and they see what's been done and what's been said, and as they get to be older, they can make up their own mind.
So I thought that was an interesting perspective on it. Back to the 5 points that I maintain are problematic within the family law courts. One, the system being adversarial. So firstly, what are we talking about when we say adversarial? Well, we're talking about the old debating structure of getting two people and they have to punch on behalf of their client as hard as they can, and the judge listens to both sides of the argument from every perspective, however inappropriate, and eventually makes a decision. And what's wrong with the adversarial system? Sure, that's what the law uses everywhere else in the world and it works. Well, I'd say it doesn't provide justice any more than democracy provides equality. It's simply the best system that we've developed so far, and it needs to develop further. The adversarial system pits people who ultimately need a reconciliation agreement against each other, and therefore pushes them further apart. It encourages mudslinging and point scoring. That's how you win in court. You impress the judge because you tell him about the time he says that, and then she says, oh my God, he's bringing that up after all these years. It's not a recipe for reconciliation. It motivates perjury. Eventually, people get more extreme in the claims that they make. And it rewards parental alienation, about which Brian spoke, with financial gain, because it is very clearly statistically proven that whoever gets the kids gets the money. Second point I make is that judges are not qualified. Family law court judges have ultimately two things to decide. One is to ensure what's best for the children, priority by a long shot. And the second is to ensure that both sides are financially cared for in the best possible way. Yet whilst judges are experts on the law, they don't fully understand either child psychology or economics. Judges are not required to have any qualifications in either of those disciplines, and yet they have the authority to make decisions for other people about them. A judge can be a solicitor one day and get appointed to the High Court bench and be a judge in a family law case of great complexity the next day. How can that judge have been trained for what he's about to undertake? Men don't like family law. They find it very tiresome, repetitive, bitchy, whatever. The result of that is that, as a general rule, male judges don't want to hear family law cases. During most of last year in Dublin, every single family law court judge in the circuit court down at Phoenix House was a woman. Every single one of them. The High Court had one very hard working family court judge who was a man, and he simply threw his hands up and said, I'm not doing this anymore. The The result is we don't have gender balance. Judge can sentence a man one day for the rape of a young girl as part of a criminal case in which they're involved. And that same judge can shortly thereafter be presented with a man who's trying to get overnight access to his little girl. Is that a recipe for absolute impartiality? I don't think so. Judges must support the judicial system and the practitioners therein first. The implications of that are that the clients and the children and the family finances have to come second. And judges are trained and accustomed to judging criminals, but there are no criminals here. The third point, on the environment being hostile. Well, in December last year, Judge Susan Ryan was presented with a man who had a gun and a bomb, again, in the Circuit Court down at Fielding's house. Turned out to be a hoax. But notwithstanding that, we now have metal detectors and security guards everywhere if you're going in or out of the place. Just doesn't feel like a place where you're going to find comfort and an amicable solution to a very difficult emotional problem. Family law court waiting room offer absolutely no privacy whatsoever. Regular to see people down there in floods of tears. People screaming and shouting as a result of the enormous emotional pain through which they're going. And the two armies, a man with his lawyer on one side and the woman with theirs on the other, and their various witnesses, they're in the same room, smaller than this, pitted against each other, dagger glances, all that kind of stuff. Again, it's not a recipe for reconciliation. Those involved are incorrectly motivated. It was touched on earlier that the legal professionals are those qui bono. If you have a serious problem and want the best senior counsel, the system does not allow you to speak to them. You must speak to a solicitor, who will then brief a barrister, who will then ultimately address on your behalf the senior counsel. So you're getting one for the price of three. Who benefits? All of these people are not paid for a job and to get the job resolved. They're paid by the hour. Their time is your money. And they're motivated, if they like money, to protract the case. If you have a large sum of money at your disposal because of the family house being sold or whatever it may be, then lawyers have been, according to some of the people who've spoken to me, deliberately taken a case which could have been resolved in 3 months and dragged it out over 3 years because there's more hours in it, there's more work, and how could they possibly justify charging that amount of money when the whole thing was done and dusted in 12 weeks? Sure, it took 3 years. And there are also allegations that sometimes unscrupulous lawyers can deliberately stir things up amongst couples and prevent them coming to amicable reconciliation, which would be in the best interests of their clients and, of course, their clients' children. And lastly, the family law courts have only titular authority. And to this I speak of the fact that they can really only punish men. This is not in the children's interests, and the judges will simply say, well, it's not in the children's interest to imprison the mother of the child. What can we do? Women realise sooner or later that they are immune to prosecution. So, flaunt the law. However, if men don't obey the law, they'll be sent to Mountjoy quick smart. And that's not justice. However, I believe that we can do things better. And it's very simple. And it just needs a change of paradigm. It needs a paradigm shift in the heads of those in charge. And it is happening slowly. We've seen the Oireachtas review of the family law courts, which was passed last month. Sadly, if you look at the conclusions to which it comes, they are almost identical to the conclusions to which the last one came. That was 24 years earlier. So it's all very well to know what to do, but we actually have to do it as well. So, if we insist on 2 years of mediation before litigation is permitted, what do we get? At separation, emotions are running high. It provides time for those emotions to calm down. Adjustment is necessary for all to the new circumstances. It provides that time. Parties need to look at having new careers. It gives them the opportunity to reskill and get their heads around what else they might be able to do. And it, of course, provides mediation, which can help to find the least damaging future for all concerned. Second point, educating the judges. Judges often rely on out-of-date thinking. Children only need their mother, being one. That was very popular in the 1960s. Brian, you might know the name of that legislation. Sorry.
Tender years.
Tender years, the very one, I couldn't remember that. But it's still relied upon, unfortunately. Time is much faster for a child. Remember those endless summers when you were a kid? It just went on and on and on. The implications of that are that a month of no access to daddy is a month to the daddy, but it's a lot longer for the kid. Because a man is a self-employed professional investor and his wife is a bank teller, should not mean that he's a gambler and she's a financial expert. But that is typically the rationale used by judges who live in a very bubble-like world. Wealth equals owning things. Long-term growth, not cash in the bank. Cash in the bank is stagnant and depreciating. Yet the first thing judges typically do is liquidate everything and divide up the cash. When in a lot of cases, it would be far smarter for all involved to say, well, we have a holiday home here, we have 2 cars, we have a family house here, let's divide them up. And let the assets and the mortgages, which mightn't be able to be applied for again because people are older now, let them stay in place. The third one was providing a purpose-built facility. And here, you have to remember, it's tough enough for people to go into the family law courts. A lot of them have never been in a courtroom before in their lives. We could make it less like a prison waiting room. Have private entries, away from prying eyes. Private rooms for the parties to go to separately. Soundproofing in those rooms, you can't hear straight through the piece of cardboard as to what's going on in the room next door. A social worker, perhaps for those who are there alone, without support. Air conditioning, so we don't have judges coming in with hammers to smash the window to let air into their courts. Water, coffee facilities, What does that cost? The fourth point, motivating speedy settlement. A lean compromise is better than a fat lawsuit. Start with a 50-50 position for all cases, access and money. Therefore, it's not a guarantee that if a woman divorces her husband, she's going to get all the money in the family home and be financially rewarded for having gotten divorced. There are many circumstances where divorce is something that can't be avoided, but there are sometimes cases where divorce is a lifestyle choice. Flat, fee-based, on unrealizable assets. So the lawyer gets, they used to call Alan Chandler Mr. 10%. Some of the people I've spoken to have lawyers who are Mr. 90%. Give bonuses to professionals who facilitate out-of-court settlements. So quantify how much it would have cost if everybody went to court, if the case settles out of court, and reward the lawyers by giving them a percentage of that. Justice delayed is justice denied. So time penalties for deliberate tactical adjournments. Financial penalties, I mean. Have a principal hearing with a standard timeline. In the UK, it's between 3 and 6 months. Here, it's from 3 months to 10 years. Bob Geldof says, in response to the judges who told him, well, sure, what can we do? She's the children's mother, we can't lock her up. He says, lock her up for an afternoon, she won't bloody do it again. And I'm inclined to agree. Stop the hiding behind the in-camera rule, where nobody's allowed to say what goes on, and give free access to anonymous reporting by journalists. This is theoretically in place at the moment, brought in again by Alan Chandler in the 2015 Act. However, there are at least 80 exceptions to letting journalists in that a judge who doesn't want to let a journalist in can choose from, and the journalist will not get in. Establish equal punishment for men and women. Mentioned earlier, men go straight to Mountjoy, women don't. And most importantly, give the Gardaí the power to get involved. Many men have told me of having not seen their children for months and months and months. They have a court order saying they're supposed to see the children every second weekend. They go to the guards time and time again. They get told, sorry, we can't get involved. It's a civil matter. You have to go back to court. They apply to go back to court. 6 months later, they get into court. The judge says, that's terrible. She says, I'm very sorry, I won't do it again. And it starts again. And there's another 6 months of absence. If the guards could get involved and say, look, he has a high court order here, Mrs. You have to release the kids, that would change a lot and benefit a lot of kids. George Bernard Shaw said, the reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable one persists in trying to adapt the world to himself. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable man. I am before you an unreasonable man. Thank you.